Hi, Technical Comprehension. This video is for Wednesday, April 8th. So on Monday's video, and then Monday's date in general, you were turning in your Chapter 8 text sheet. We wrapped up Chapter 8 pretty much last week, so you would have already submitted with Chapter 8 both your text sheet and your vocabulary quiz, as well as your patterns of organization practice if you wanted extra credit on the vocabulary quiz for Chapter 8. Excuse me. In Chapter 9 so far, on Monday, April 6th video, we already went in and we got started on our text sheet. We did parts A, B, and C of our text sheet, and we got all of the vocabulary from Chapter 9. So that's where we are picking up from. So as a review, I'm going to pull up the PowerPoint for this chapter, and I'm just going to go through the concepts again and touch on a couple of concepts that we did not discuss, and then do some practices with you. So as a review, critical thinking was the kind of the overall concept of this chapter, but it's really an umbrella because there are so many little pieces and parts to critical thinking. And this is also one of your mastery skills, and the video was already uploaded. So the first basic part was about fact and opinion. The basic definition is that a fact is provable, true, or false, but opinions are not. They are not provable. They are values. So facts you can look up, you can verify, and if it happens to turn out that it's not accurate, it's a false fact. So you can measure it, observe it somehow. Opinions are those value words, feelings, attitudes, beliefs, as well as like making predictions, future events. Those are opinions. Now, as we talked about, there are often times where you just have to look at the context to see whether an author is using a fact or an opinion, or how they're using that. And then very frequently, as we saw in a couple of our practices, authors will combine facts and opinions together. So they'll have partial fact, and then even like a word or a phrase of opinion will kind of mix that together. So that was fact and opinion. We then talked about author's purpose, why an author wrote a particular piece of writing. And we looked at some examples inside our Chapter 9 texts already to kind of see, are they writing to inform? I don't know where the rest of my slide went there. Are they writing to persuade? Are they writing to entertain? Are they writing to narrate? Or are they writing to describe? So those are different reasons authors will write. And you can kind of tell, maybe based on the tone, the types of information, whether they're using facts, opinions, if they have a bias present, to let you know what they're doing in general. And so to find out, you just kind of ask yourself, why did the author write this? Why are they writing this? Are they giving this to give me information? Are they trying to persuade me, like convince me to think a certain way? Are they just telling me a story in the order it occurred? Are they trying to make me visualize? Or are they trying to like entertain me? And so we looked at some examples, again, in our text. Very closely related to this, we talked about author's audience, like who was this written? For who was this written? Was this written for a group of maybe intro-level students at a certain field, or was this written for experts in the field? So knowing the audience can help you figure out the purpose, as well as the tone, their feelings. How does an author feel about a topic? What is their attitude? Sometimes an author will be very evident because they'll use positive or negative type words to indicate their tone. Sometimes they'll be more neutral. They'll be straightforward, and they will not have a particular tone associated with it. We also did not talk about, this is new, bias, but this kind of goes very closely with tone and purpose. So bias is when an author presents their attitude, their opinion about something. So as humans, it's natural for us to have bias. We naturally like certain things, we don't like certain things. We prefer to do or not do, or shop or not shop at certain places. So bias is natural, but when you're writing, it's important to know if an author is biased or not, because if you can't recognize bias, you might be influenced into thinking a certain way without knowing the whole other side of the story. So you want to look to see, is the author using words like all, should, could, would? Are they telling something is good or bad? If so, it's biased, and it can be biased for something or biased against something. Now, if you can't tell, if you have no idea what their feelings are, that's an example of unbiased. They are not showing they're biased. So maybe it's just straightforward, like a textbook. That's supposed to be unbiased. Just here's the information. Another way an author could be unbiased is just by giving both sides of the story. They give the good and the bad, so they kind of equal it out. Point of view is another concept kind of close related, their perspective or their attitude toward a particular topic. So, looking to see again what kind of words they're using, the thesis, and so on. So that's kind of the other concept that we didn't quite get to on Monday's video. So I wanted to go over it today. So to practice some of these, I'm going to go ahead and get into some of these paragraphs. We're not going to look at every single one, but it is going to let us kind of practice these concepts of bias as well as purpose. So I'm going to go down here to number 4. I'm going to read this, and our job is to determine whether there is bias in favor, bias against, or there's no bias at all. A movement is building against the commercialism that surrounds Christmas. In 2003, Adbusters magazine, which argues in favor of a simpler, low-consumption lifestyle, persuaded 5 million people in 65 nations to observe Buy Nothing Day on the day after Thanksgiving, the traditional start of the Christmas shopping season. The magazine also advocates no-buy holidays, in which people spend time together rather than buying each other gifts. Books like $100 Holiday encourage consumers to give the gift of time rather than store-bought items. And nonprofit groups like the Center for a New American Dream echo the message that commercialism of Christmas has gotten out of hand, leaving many Americans exhausted, depressed, and deeper in debt. That organization advocates donating to charities instead of buying gifts for family members and friends. Others, however, argue that Christmas commercialism is a good thing. Writer Richard Sincere has said that every time you buy a Christmas gift, a toy, a CD player, a spice rack, a hunting rifle, you are helping to pay someone's wages. Millions of such purchases made every day in the Christmas shopping season keep factories open, keep workers employed, keep families fed, because over 25% of the year's retail business occurs during the Christmas season. Holiday commercialism is important to our country's economy. Without it, year-round prices would be a good deal higher. Furthermore, Andrew Bernstein of the Ayn Rand Institute argues that we should celebrate the commercialism of Christmas because it is a sign of material prosperity and that in itself inspires goodwill and friendly feelings toward fellow citizens. So here's an example where they kind of present up here. They're talking about how, we should not be buying things over Christmas. We spend too much money. We are too concerned with things, and we need to spend time with one another. So that's what this highlighted blue. And then you can see it says others, however. So it starts going in a different direction. In this section, and you can kind of tell they're almost equal, which isn't a scientific way of doing this, but they're almost equal the amount of time they spend. This section says, wait a minute, it's actually a good thing that we do this. We should keep doing this. So this is an example where there is no bias. There is no bias here because the author presents both sides of an article, like an argument or both sides of a point equally. And he doesn't come right out and say, based on this, buying things at Christmas is great, or based on this, buying things at Christmas is awful. So this is an example of no bias because he presented both sides of the story pretty equally. So let's look at one down here. I will tell you that there is bias in this one. So let's see as I read this if you can determine if it's bias in favor or bias against. Are illegal immigrants good or bad for the U.S. economy? Several studies have indicated that the presence of illegal immigrants is good for the country because most will work in low-skill, low-paying jobs. For one thing, their labor keeps prices of many goods and services low. Lindsay Lowell, Director of Policy Studies at the Institute for the Study of International Migration at Georgetown University, says that products and services are significantly cheaper in the U.S. than in Europe, precisely because so much of the work is done by illegal workers. For example, a high concentration of undocumented workers in the agricultural industry keeps food prices down. Indeed, proponents of allowing illegal workers to stay in the country argue that the U.S. economy could not function without their work. Plus, the average illegal immigrant household pays about $4,200 a year in federal taxes, for an annual total of almost $16 billion. Okay. So the first thing, again, in all of these, and I'm going to demonstrate it here, is finding out what the topic is. So the topic here, hopefully you can tell, is illegal immigrants, because they mention that over and over. And so if we're trying to figure out if there's bias, he kind of presents this question, is it good or bad? Well, he gives all of the advantages of illegal immigrants being in the United States. He says they keep food prices down, they pay all of these taxes, they work in low-skill, low-paying jobs, and he's saying that it is all good for the country. He does not present any negatives to having illegal immigrants in the country. It is all positive. So he is, in fact, giving us bias in favor of this topic. So that's a way we can tell that there is bias. All good, no bad. All right, let's look at this one right here. And again, I will tell you that there is bias, so let's see if you can determine it as I read. Miracles have been defined as divinely caused violations of the rules of natural order. In other words, miracles are events that defy reason and suggest supernatural intervention. Take, for example, the miraculous cures at Lourdes. The International Medical Community of Lourdes, a group of about 20 French doctors, has certified 2,000 unexplained cures. And I want you to pay attention to how they put the word cures in quotation marks. Taking place after people visited the spring where St. Bernadette allegedly saw visions of the Virgin Mary in 1858. For many people, the healing of the sick at Lourdes is a miracle, and the Catholic Church itself officially recognizes 66 of the miracles supposedly performed at Lourdes. Remember, though, that the Catholic Church has also been forced to declare many other, again, here we go, those quotation marks, miraculous events to be hoaxes. For instance, a statue in the church in Thornton, California supposedly wept and walked around the church at night, yet no one ever witnessed the statue actually moving. When church officials conducted an investigation, they had to pronounce the wandering statue a fraud. Indeed, both church-sponsored and private investigations of miracles led to logical explanations, often revealing fakes in the process. Every time investigators, such as the skeptic and author Joe Nickell, are given the chance to use stethoscopes, x-rays, chemical analyses, and other scientific tools to examine so-called miracles such as crying or bleeding statues, statues with heartbeats, and people with stigmata, wounds like those of Christ, they easily debunk the supposed miraculous occurrence. Okay, so our topic here is miracles, whether or not they exist. And hopefully, as you saw, like whenever someone uses quotation marks around words and they're not quoting something, they're usually kind of being sarcastic or dismissive. And so that combined with the fact that he constantly says like supposedly, supposed, talking about debunking, this guy is biased against miracles. He does not think they exist, and he used all of this information to try to emphasize that point. So that is an example of bias. Okay, let's do just maybe 2 more practices here. And this is going to both have us practice purpose as well as bias. So let's just look at, we're just going to look at 2 more paragraphs. So as I read these 2 paragraphs here, paragraphs 3 and 4, we're going to both try to determine what the purpose is. You know, are they informing, persuading, narrating, describing, and is there bias present? So this one here, in 1939, the guillotine, the device used to punish convicted criminals by cutting their heads off, was retired as an instrument of public execution. Because the guillotine was used to take lives, it was not generally viewed as an instrument that benefited humanity. Yet, in fact, at the time of its creation, the guillotine was supposed to have a humanitarian purpose. It would provide every criminal with the gift of a quick and painless death. The man who gave the guillotine its name, Joseph Ignace Guillotin, certainly saw the device as beneficial. In 1789, Guillotin persuaded the French government to pass a law requiring all public executions to be carried out by machine. The goal of the law was to eliminate problems caused by executioners not fully equipped for the job. There were, for instance, some whose hands shook too much to produce a clean slice through the neck, and some whose arms lacked enough strength to bring an axe down full force. The machine itself was the work of Dr. Antoine Louis, a French surgeon, and Tobias Schmidt, a German harpsichord maker. Dr. Louis knew what portion of the neck would most quickly succumb to the blow of the axe. Mr. Schmidt knew how to make the axe sharp enough to cut through flesh with one blow. In 1792, the newly created guillotine got its first victim, a robber named Nicolas Jacques Petier. The execution was pronounced a success, and the guillotine was praised for granting a speedy and seemingly painless death. Okay, so hopefully you can tell, like as we're going through here, there's a lot of information. 1939, 1789, it talks about different dates, it talks about different names. This is really giving us some information. And because of that, there is no bias. This author is not saying, oh, the guillotine is fantastic or the guillotine is awful. It's just kind of going through and telling us what it is, who made it, and how it came to kind of evolve and be. So this would be an example of informative and no bias present. All right, let's look at one more. 10 years ago, multitasking was all the rage as those lucky enough to be armed with laptops and cell phones bragged about completing 3 or 4 tasks at once. Science, however, has given us second, maybe even third thoughts about the advantages of multitasking. So again, as you read, Be thinking, what is the topic? And so they're talking about multitasking. The evidence increasingly suggests that we work more efficiently when we do one thing at a time rather than several. That's because multitasking apparently overtaxes the brain. As we try to, for instance, drive a car, send off a text message, maintain a conversation, and check out a new photo we've just received, the brain is forced to process different kinds of verbal and visual information, all the while maintaining the body's physical coordination. Juggling those different tasks pushes the brain to its limits, and the research suggests that the brain becomes overwhelmed by its efforts to keep up. While we manage to get all the tasks done, we don't do any of them particularly well. In a study at the University of California at Los Angeles, for instance, researchers found that multitaskers finished the filing job they were assigned just as quickly as those who were focused solely on one single task. The multitaskers, however, didn't remember much about the files or where they had put them. Those who had been doing nothing but filing, in contrast, remembered what it was they had been putting away, and even more importantly, where they had filed the material. All right, so as they went through here, they talked about multitasking and really focused quite a bit of the time on how you really shouldn't multitask. It is more you should be single tasking. You should do one thing at a time. So because of that, there is bias present. This author does not give us the good and the bad. This is just the bad against multitasking. So because of that, it's not just informative. It's not just telling us what multitasking is. It is persuasive, and there is a bias against multitasking. This author feels like we should not be multitasking. Okay, so those were just some examples of your bias, your purpose, looking to see how authors are using language. So if you want more practice, with bias, and normally in class, you all would know I would have tons of paper and exercises to hand out and we do together. If you feel like you need more practice, if you want to go through it a little bit more in depth, please let me know. I can send you some documents. I can send you some links. I can explain it to you in whatever you feel like you might benefit from. Okay, so now we are going to go ahead and take a look at your Chapter 9 text sheet. We're going to wrap this up. Chapter 9 text sheet. So again, if you're looking at your Blackboard course, we do have the Chapter 9 text sheet. We started it on Monday, and so I just added the Dropbox today. So you will download it right here, Dropbox, and submit it right there. This is going to be due, and I'll repeat this, on Monday, April 13th for week 12 attendance. So you'll be doing this and completing it all the way Monday, April 13th for week 12 attendance. So Chapter 9 text sheet, we did A, B, and C together on a previous video, so we're just going to focus on parts D and E today. So part D wants us to do the on-the-job interview with a veterinarian, Dr. Scott Gearhart. As we read, we want to know what his tone is, what do you think his purpose is, and who is his audience. So if you get your textbook up and going, I'm going to ask that you pause the video and go ahead and take a read through this interview. So that you can understand, kind of get some of these. So I'll again assume that you maybe paused. We'll come back together. All right, so hopefully you've read Dr. Scott Gearhart's interview. He's a veterinarian at SeaWorld in Florida, and we have a couple questions to answer regarding his interview. What is his tone? So what is his tone? How did he feel? Well, this is his job. If you look, it talks about, he's always dreamed of becoming a veterinarian. He couldn't wait to do this stuff. He couldn't wait to get his hands on all these different creatures. And while he's had obstacles, he has the greatest job in the world. So we would say, sorry about that, his tone is very positive, maybe even like just uplifting. This is a very positive tone. He feels very strongly, positively toward his overall career. What is his purpose? Now, keep in mind, he may, I have too many things going on here. He may be trying to persuade people. That might be a side effect to become a veterinarian. But in general, the purpose of an interview is to inform. He's going through and he's given information. Here's why, here's how, here's what. This is mostly to inform. And I will say hints of persuade. The only reason I say that is because, again, like he might be trying to, he's not necessarily giving us a lot of the negative. He does talk about, some of the obstacles. So he gives us a little taste, but he doesn't really give us kind of the negative side of being a veterinarian. He doesn't say necessarily, like, oh, I've got to put animals down. He does talk about challenges. But that's not necessarily the same as like trying to present both sides equally. So, and again, like, I guess I should have put down that it continues on 407. Hopefully you figured that out as you went through. But he talks about mostly, the positives, and so he might be trying to persuade a little bit for people to look into the field of veterinary medicine. So that's mostly his tone is a positive. His purpose is mostly inform. And then audience, I would just say anyone interested in being a veterinarian. Yeah, so that's his audience. Anyone who might be interested in being a veterinarian. Okay, now part E. Per usual, we are going to do part 1 together, so you are not going to fill part 1 out here, but you will do part 2 or 3 on your own. So I will do part 1 with you as a practice, and then you will do 2 or 3 on your own to submit. So part 1 is going to be over on page 412. And this is going to walk you through how this will look for when you do 2 or 3. On May 18, 1980, one of the most tragic natural disasters occurred in Washington state. Mount St. Helens, a volcanic mountain, erupted with incredible force, flattening trees within a 160-mile radius. The eruption killed 59 people, including those who died from the intense heat and the clouds of ash and gases in the air. The gases and ash from the eruption shot more than 11 miles into the atmosphere. This caused crop damage in states as far away as the Midwest. The ash clouds over the city of Yakima, Washington were so thick it became as dark as night at noon. Mount St. Helens is one of the 15 large volcanoes in the Cascade Mountain Range near the west coast of North America. Several others in this range could erupt in the future. Okay, so as we read, hopefully you could tell that the topic is Mount St. Helens, specifically the eruption at Mount St. Helens. So that's our topic. What is the main idea? Well, only 2 of them even mention Mount St. Helens, but this one is more of an opinion phrase. A is an opinion. D is our main idea. It just says, okay, 1980, this volcano erupted and it destroyed lots of things. So basically it kind of summarizes that entire paragraph without giving an opinion. It's just telling you what happened. So which of the following of these is an opinion? I kind of alluded to that already based on one of the options that were up here. But if you look, 3 of these are just facts. 3 of these you could verify, look up, people observed, measured. A is an opinion. One of the most tragic. That's an opinion. Although it might be tragic based on how many people died, someone may think, oh no, something else happened, 5 years later, and that was really more tragic than this. So that is an opinion phrase. So that's our opinion. What do we think the author's purpose is? So if we look, the purpose seems more to be, I don't necessarily feel like I'm being entertained or persuaded, but I'm definitely being informed about this eruption. So that is my purpose, inform. And then what is the tone? They're talking about a lot of people dying and property damage. That's a pretty serious tone. That's pretty serious. All right, so for part E on your text sheet, you are either going to read, again, this is real uplifting, about baby seals being killed in practice 2. Or you're going to read about rainbows in practice 3. So whatever one you want to focus on, and it's going to be very similar to the questions we just answered. Make sure you tell me, are you doing 2 or 3? And then do your responses there. When you are done with your text sheet, you, again, will have a Dropbox in the Chapter 9. You'll see the Chapter 9 text sheet Dropbox, and that is due Monday, April 13th. Next, your Chapter 9 vocabulary quiz is right underneath there. Here it is. When you click on it, you'll have your 9 quiz. Remember, we've already gone over the vocabulary. It's up here, Chapter 9 study guide. Here is your quiz. Remember, correct or incorrect, please. Some of you are still kind of not doing this correctly. Keep the underlined word the same. Try to keep the heart of the sentence, meaning when you rewrite your sentence, it should still somewhat resemble the original sentence. I don't want you like just brand new sentence or defining the word. Fix the sentence somehow. Add, take away, rearrange, whatever you need to do. One of those is correct. Part B, just remember to answer the question that's being asked. Question 4 is a two-parter. What phenomenon interests you and why? And then part C is your fill in the blank. So that is also going to be due Monday, April 13th. So Monday, April 13th, and you'll see it's together. It's the Dropbox and the document there. So you are turning in both the text sheet and the vocabulary quiz Monday, April 13th for your week 12 attendance. And the last thing I'm going to talk to you today about in this video is your mastery skills assessment. Your mastery skills are still due at the end of week 14, April 24th. Remember, you are completing all 9 skills, and you need an 80% or higher to consider passing this portion. Now, again, the reading process, vocabulary, topic, and main idea, we talked about those and kind of went over those before spring break, so that's why there's no videos there, because most of you had already finished them. But you'll notice that for just about the rest of the skills, the videos have already been uploaded. So we have supporting details, and most of them are post-test 1, but you'll see like supporting details is test 2. There's your patterns of organization. There's your drawing conclusions. There's your implied main idea. Critical thinking, I'm going to open that here shortly because we just talked about a lot of those concepts, but that is already uploaded and ready to go. And then combined skills, which will be open up soon as well. So please take advantage of these. I really hope that they're helpful. I hope that they're helping your overall score. And I'll talk to you again in a later video. Bye.